think it's safe to say that next to the 1990s, the 2010s have been some of the very best for animation. Sure, there were some unpopular trends when it came to character designs and comedic revivals, and it's becoming as franchise-focused as the rest of the entertainment industry, but the medium has always followed trends, and it didn't stop the bar for storytelling and visuals from being higher than it's ever been. Creator-driven cartoons came back with a vengeance, and were given a chance to thrive. The stigma of cartoons being kid stuff isn't going anywhere, but the medium has definitely become more accepted as not only something for all ages, but also a form to tell stories that push the boundaries of structure and representation. I'll be honoring the absolute highs and lows from the second decade of this recent millennium, providing my favorite and least favorite shows alongside a personal highlight for each year. For the sake of simplicity, the shows featured will be based upon their first season, or first year, and will only cover American television animation, since that's my forte. If I discussed just as many feature films in this video, we'd be here all day. I know that some of you want that, but I want to keep my sanity, so this is how we're going to revisit animation in the 2010s.
It's a shame how much quality scripted and board-driven content is ignored.
Around the dawn of the new decade, not one but 4 major kids' television networks would gain new branding. It seemed like change was in the air, but Nickelodeon and Disney XD continued to stick to their guns, only bringing in a few new projects that didn't stick for very long. Thankfully, the same applied to Planet Sheen.
Hey! Where's the bathroom in this place? I gotta go serious bad. I'm talking end of the movie, just finished a mega size soda, but don't want to miss the bad guy get caught and the whole crowd go, ah!
You ever watch Jimmy Neutron but hate the chemistry between the main trio and the wealth of unforgettable side characters? You wish that it had disgusting animation and textures, cutaway gags, little to no plot structure, and Carl but green? Well, here's Planet Sheen, a spin-off that expects a shallow character to carry a show all on his own, surrounded by a topical Avatar parody girl and a standard grouchy neighbor named Dorcas. He is voiced by Jeff Bennett, so he's automatically the best part.
I shall, my liege. I'll definitely take care of him.
That sounds kind of threatening.
Oh, did it? I say a lot of things like that. For example, just the other day, I was thinking about watering my garden patch.
Outside of 2 of the characters and vaguely the sense of humor, this basically has nothing in common with Jimmy Neutron. The world of Xenu is so paper thin and doesn't take advantage of all the cool aliens and planets that the previous show set up. If this was just a special episode or something with more of a goal in sight, Planet Sheen could have had a little more momentum. But as is, it was very gross. Cartoon Network entered its Check It era this year, and this is where I really got invested in the channel. Over the summer of 2010, I went on a family vacation and was exposed to so much of its programming at once. Although the one show that completely went under my radar was Sym-Bionic Titan, which literally has the opposite premise and quality of Planet Sheen. It's about 3 aliens escaping from their home planet and landing on Earth, but they also gotta fight the monster of the week and go to high school. It's like if John Hughes directed Pacific Rim, and with Samurai Jack creator Genndy Tartakovsky at the helm, everything is so well constructed.
If only we had Lance. I know he could help even the odds.
The word is he's on a mission for the king, and I'm sure it's far more dangerous than this.
The integration of these very different plot threads is excellent, never affecting the lives of the main characters in the same way twice. Every episode feels like its own mini-action movie, still tackling teenage topics in ways that never talk down to its audience. And you can see that in the only clip that people remember from this series because haha, it's sex appeal in a kid's show! Its legacy might be flimsy, but I'm happy that people still remember Sym-Bionic Titan. So much that Cartoon Network aired around this time were short-lived experiments, but their efforts paid off in the long run. I'll always remember the important lesson that they taught me about voice actor changes. It never once occurred to me that a cartoon character's voice could be done by someone else in the middle of the run. I enjoy whenever an attempt is made to mask the switch in universe.
What was that?
Like, oh no, Leonardo from the 2012 Ninja Turtles got hit in the windpipe. That's why he sounds like Seth Green now.
So, why does he sound different?
he sustained damage to his throat, and pretty much everywhere else for that matter.
It was a rude awakening to me when I logged on to CartoonNetwork.com, watched a clip of the upcoming Johnny Test season, and heard that my favorite character, whose name was Dookie, now sounded different.
I can't let you do this! Nobody has ever made it all the way down Suicide Hill! It's too big! Look!
I don't know, Johnny. This list seems a little dangerous and risky.
Despite being a die-hard fan at the time, it was something that bugged me no matter how much I wanted to accept it. It broke the immersion between the show and its production, and was one of the first times it ever dawned on me that doing voices in a cartoon was a career that one could be replaced in. But enough of those major realizations from my childhood. Let's talk about two shows that are both about jerks, Allen Gregory and Dan Versus. Allen Gregory is a pretentious 8-year-old forced to attend public school for the first time. Simply put, he and his manipulative father are unlikable characters who the audience is never given a reason to root for. There's some average comedy with the rest of the cast, but they never feel like more than punchlines. All the comedy feels half-hearted, even when it's content with being inoffensive.
You fired the housekeeper for using the bathroom.
Yeah, what's the confusion? Well, what are we gonna do about this?
Well, I guess we're just gonna have to clean up after ourselves.
Okay, let's grab this here. Put that on that. I guess that works.
I didn't even mention the storyline about Allen Gregory trying to seduce his elderly principal, which was so funny that it was the focus of 4 whole episodes. Fox didn't even care to give this more than 7 episodes, so that disgusting storyline was featured in 57% of the series. I'll give Allen Gregory some credit though. I probably would have stopped after episode 2 if I didn't know its run would be so short. Dan Versus seems like a show that could have been screwed up just as easily. Early on, there's no consistent world or supporting cast, just a middle-aged man going up against anything that happens to wrong him with the help of his best friend and his best friend's wife, no matter how big of a challenge it may be.
Who's responsible for this?
Dan is not a good person, but most of the time he's the underdog, fighting against a relatable annoyance that usually deserves to be taken down a peg. The writing is strong enough that just the character banter is able to carry most episodes, and the plots make the absolute most out of the premises in each 22-minute episode. The character animation could be stronger, some designs look like they came from another show, and I'm quite disappointed that there isn't a proper intro. But Dan Versus is a great series regardless. It is so refreshing to watch a show with adult protagonists and dark humor that isn't necessarily made for adults, especially one that aired on the same network as My Little Pony.
My car! Bedazzled! Pinkie Pie!
You're welcome!
In a year where they premiered exactly one 11-minute episode, I became a huge fan of the Fairly Oddparents after being introduced to the series with a holiday-themed marathon. I can't find any screen caps or recordings from its premiere on Sunday, December 2nd, but I remember the lineup consisted of 3 great specials, along with the Christmas episodes and a few hours of Drake Hell. Not a perfect introduction, but it made me wonder why it took me 11 years to give it a look.
I can't believe I am only hearing about this now.
Alright Timmy, in my defense, it was easy to get distracted by Cartoon Network, as they continued to dominate the decade, and this year they even did a fantastic job honoring their own history. After establishing such a solid weekly lineup, I don't see how they could screw it. Oh, here's one of CN's final live-action shows, if this counts as live action, or even a show at all. Little about the high-fructose adventures of the Annoying Orange feels like a step up from its source material. Like most web series turned into a full series, episodes feel like a collection of skits instead of one strong narrative. It's as if a character with annoying in his name works better in small doses. There's a limited mix of green screen backgrounds and sets, but the uncanniness of the characters makes the world feel just as fake. Unless you really like Tobuscus doing prop comedy for half a minute each episode, there's nothing here that you can't already see online.
My pants! That's perfect!
A slew of these episodes have been uploaded to the Annoying Orange YouTube channel, so it begs the question of why this was made in the first place. It sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of this year's animated output, because there's so many options to choose from when picking its best. I mean, I could talk about The Legend of Korra, the Ninja Turtles with Seth Green, Motor City, and oh wait, Gravity Falls came out this year. I recently rewatched this with the Blu-ray's commentary track, and the creators emphasized that the first season of the show had more standard comedy storylines and was done a little more on the fly, which contrasts with the well-constructed mystery we remember the series for. Season 1 might be the weaker half when it comes to the creatures and characters, but on its own, it's still a fantastically funny set of stories.
Help! I'm trapped in the game! It was cool in theory, but in practice it was really boring.
I was quite happy that I was able to jump on board when Gravity Falls premiered, as I watched most of the first season on repeat in anticipation for more. Luckily, around that same time, there was another 2-season serialized small-town mystery series to occupy my time. Along with the Looney Tunes show, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated being a great show was a nice surprise, wrapping a long-term overarching plot around stylized takes on traditional Scooby-Doo mysteries and characters made this the definitive series from the 50-year-old franchise. 6 years after its initial airing, I still remember the final run of episodes. The Hex Girls came back, Shaggy and Scooby got really fat, and a side character was murdered off-screen. Mystery Incorporated did not know the meaning of too dark, and that was both a blessing and a curse.
Come on, Scooby. We have to keep going.
2013 is probably the most infamous year of this decade, as it was when streaming services began to develop their own programming amongst a handful of its most defining shows. At long last, Adult Swim broke into mainstream culture with Rick and Morty. Even before it became an evergreen merchandising meme machine, the late-night block had a lot riding on its success, advertising it hard right out of the gate.
Oh, hey, Rick, what's the show about anyway?
Oh, it's just a crazy sci-fi show, Morty. Oh, all kinds of wild stuff happens each week. Oh, each episode's like a little mini sci-fi adventure movie, Morty.
Oh, wow, Rick, I'm pretty impressed about that.
Adult Swim had barely tried to seriously compete with the standards that Fox set for adult animation with their lineup, but they truly had the right people for the job. Rick and Morty is one of the only shows where the second episode is considered to be an all-timer. Its dark and disturbed brand of humor was clear right out of the gate, and the plots were a strong marriage of parodies and tributes to science fiction. I'm not entirely sure where my feelings on this series stand now, but back in the year where we lost Futurama, it was a more than sufficient replacement. Now I'm sure you're all waiting to hear my thoughts on a certain superhero reboot from this year. So here it is, Hulk and the Agents of Smash. Basically, it's like iCarly, but with the Hulk. From Marvel's first attempt at an animated cinematic universe this decade comes a show with 5 different colored Hulks for the price of one, where it's clear at which point they stopped caring about giving them names. The Agents of Smash fight aliens on the daily, but there's also confession cam interview segments compiled for an in-universe web series filmed by the Hulk A-Bomb, who is also voiced by Seth Green. How could a man with so much green be so blue?
Iron Man built armor to fight me! Hey, wait a minute!
The titular Hulk is one of the most boring parts of his own show. Bruce Banner isn't a clear part of his identity, but he isn't a complete savage either. He's like a father telling his kids to get in line. And unfortunately, Dad Hulk is not as funny as it sounds, although this Hulk does have an interesting catchphrase.
Looks like I'm needed. Time to smash.
Hulk and the Agents of Smash would be nothing more than a mediocre action show with a dumb hook if it wasn't for the editing. There's constant zooms, crops, and whip hands, which only emphasize how poorly rendered the backgrounds are with the characters. I guess they were trying to simulate the look of a comic book, but I'm not really sure how this is accomplished by having JPEGs slide across the screen instead of actual animation. Watching this show is like looking at this Hulk poster for half an hour. You're just waiting for the Hulk to reach out and grab you, but he never does. He never comes to smash. Before you could stream any episode of The Simpsons anytime on Disney+, I set my DVR settings to save until I delete when FXX's first Every Simpsons Ever marathon rolled around. But it was empowering to have so many options at my fingertips when I had only dipped my toe into the world of Springfield. Of course, this is where the first 19.5 seasons were cropped to a widescreen aspect ratio, which is currently the only form you can legally stream or download the show in. Not only is this bad for preserving the original versions of these episodes, but now this joke from 2015 is outdated.
Don't complain or they'll put us in 4x3. Oh, they're doing it now! Just because it looks like Season 4 doesn't make it Season 4.
I don't care if it's a miniseries. Over the Garden Wall was the best thing I watched in 2014. It owns its unique mix of both classic folklore and animation storytelling, done at such a caliber that I can ignore it basically stealing a background from Clarence for one of its final shots.
We work on the same floor as the production crew for Clarence, and you were like, well, I wonder if they did this shot in Clarence. So we just went over and asked.
Yeah, we needed a big exterior shot of a town, and we're like, yeah, maybe Clarence already did it.
Yeah.
People thought that this was an intentional crossover between the two projects, and I don't blame them with how the rest of Over the Garden Wall is so intricately crafted. But in reality, the artists got lazy, and they got away with it, and that's a surefire mark of quality. Mr. Pickles is the opposite in terms of how it was received, but of all the shows that took the worst spot in this decade, this was the one that came closest to being good. The characters are surprisingly likable, especially the wacky one-offs that only exist to be killed off. But those who we follow from episode to episode have repetitive storylines, grotesque designs, and just aren't interesting. Folks pretend like this show beat them up and gave them a bruise. But I think the only thing here that could be capable of such a thing is the theme song, because it slaps! I don't like Mr. Pickles, but I'll admit that it could be something greater if it was retooled, and that's exactly what it did recently. Ooh, can you name a bigger glow-up this decade? I wonder if anyone will truly feel worse about themselves if they compare their lives to the evolution of a cartoon about a satanic dog.
So what are your guys' inspiration? Real quick, everyone, just say it.
SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water.
I can explain.
The second SpongeBob movie is extra important to me because it came at a point where I'd stopped watching the series that had truly gotten me invested in animation. But this film reeled me back in with its all-around gorgeous art direction and comedy. It's covered in flaws, but I don't think that its positives have ever gotten enough credit, and that helped motivate me to start making reviews for this channel. So for that, it holds a special place in my heart.
Will you stop playing that tiny piano?
Nickelodeon also managed to be behind my favorite show of the year, Harvey Beaks.
Man, that cat sure does love lasagna.
While the drama around its cancellation is what we know it for now, it's a charming portrayal of childhood through a group of kids who also happen to be animals. Despite having characters who could be perceived as bad influences, a positive spirit runs through the entire world, one that is gorgeously accompanied by unique painted backgrounds and an authentic orchestral soundtrack. We Bare Bears also debuted this year and was a similarly upbeat slice-of-life show, although it can't compete with the timeless sincerity of Harvey Beaks. Using modern-day technology and slang isn't an inherently bad thing. It can just be a problem if it's overdone, like in the intro to Pickle and Peanut.
Sharks, swords, yogurt, kicks, fries, smartphones, hot tubs, yeah.
Disney XD was really pushing for its brand to be built around nonsensical comedy for a year or so, and what would you know, it didn't catch on. Pickle and Peanut is like if regular show was less about its characters and more about non sequiturs and cutaways. I like mixed media as much as the next guy, but it does nothing to make the art style look less ugly. It kind of reminds me of Lauren Child's illustrations for Charlie and Lola, except butchered to the point where the best looking element are the characters built from stock images. This is one of the last kids cartoons from recent memory whose sole goal was being as weird as it could be, as that pesky storytelling would continue to take center stage. This wasn't quite the swan song that the genre deserved, especially if you listen to that credits theme.
How's your mom?
She's doing pretty well.
How's your mom?
Her ankle's kinda swell.
After 40-ish episodes across 2 fantastic seasons, we said goodbye to one of Disney XD's greatest offerings. I'm of course talking about Wander Over Yonder. Of these 2 finales, this one hit harder for me just by being so bittersweet. After pushing the cast to their limit by introducing a new threat and perfecting the marriage between classic comedy and modern story-driven cartoons along the way, there was still a galaxy worth of stories left to explore. I can't believe it got canceled because Disney thought about renewing it, but then was like,
nah, I don't really feel like it.
I think this was a lackluster year for animation. The best it had to offer was The Loud House, a solid show when it began for sure, but one that always played it safe. It feels like a throwback to something Nickelodeon would have aired 12 years prior, although I respect it for not trying to shove 11 plus characters into each episode and playing around with their screen time distribution. A lot of the family teeters on being unlikable, cause most of the plots are about wacky misunderstandings between them. Good thing that never became a problem later down the road. It's time to talk about my least favorite cartoon of the decade, Powerpuff Girls 2016. It's kind of like the old show, except they got rid of all the stylish action that made it appealing. Say what you will about Teen Titans Go, but even they have a better grasp on how this show should look and feel. Every other episode feels like a first draft, not just with how the writing barely fits the characters or the world, but also in the animation. I hate the oversaturated backgrounds and how unnaturally posed the main trio can be, but they screwed up the simplest of details multiple times. I wish that this show would self-destruct.
Come on! Mama needs a new pair of Mr. Bunny's coding books. Yay! 4!
Bubbles, that's a 5. I've stated my opinions on this year's best and worst offerings multiple times, so here's some runners-up instead. I dare to say that the DuckTales reboot is the best animated reboot, and just downright best animated show on the air today. The 80s show is fine for what it is, but everything in this modern iteration has an extra layer of polish that makes the world of Duckburg all its own, especially the character animation. It's way better than I ever expected it to be. This truly deserves more than the minuscule amount of coverage I provided it, so best case scenario for me is if it ends within the next year, because I really need to use my free year of Disney Plus to do more than watch Doug's first movie in the highest possible quality. Speaking of television rising from the dead, Samurai Jack made its long-awaited return this year, and at times, I think the experience of watching this revival might have been better than the revival itself. Watching these episodes live at the end of a long day and seeing the internet unanimously erupt with joy over each new chapter was a rare but wonderful experience. At least until the very end. People similarly went nuts when shows like Big Mouth and the Magic School Bus Rides Again came out. It also didn't help that they both dropped on the same exact day. Your cartoon has to be a special brand of boring to not even get the attention of mindless detractors, and Comedy Central's Jeff and Some Aliens did just that. That being said, hidden within are some very creative episode ideas and some good gags to go along with them, but the lack of solid characters that can't support any emotion sucks out a lot of potential.
This is still amazing. I gotta be careful and stick to the essentials.
Yeah! 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 Yeah!
Oops.
Jeff himself is billed as the most average man in the universe, and he lives up to those expectations. Most of what he does on screen is influenced by a trio of interchangeable aliens, and their only exposure to the outside world is through Jeff. Along with plots that drag on for an act too long, and unappealing animation with an unusual fixation on pubic hair, Jeff and Some Aliens is a decent concept squandered by a directionless execution. It's too bad that this couldn't have turned out like another one of Comedy Central's hit cartoons. You know, Brickleberry. Now that show knew exactly what it wanted to be. Did you guys know that Adventure Time ended this year? I was so sad and also talked about it 3 different times. So give me another 8 years until I can touch it again. Around this time, there was so much variety if you knew where to look for it. We got some slice of life shows, action shows, but also shows that still feel like they could only belong on Adult Swim. Ballmasters 9009 was recently recommended to me after I spent 4 videos gushing over OKKO this year, and I'm so glad that there's still hyper-stylized anime-influenced cartoons like this. What we have here is a redemption story, with some light parody of shonen anime tropes thrown in, but it's more of an excuse to hang out with some fun characters and watch animation studio Titmouse work their magic. Even in dialogue-heavy scenes, details like the boiling lines make this a treat for the eyes. Ballmasters needs a few more episodes to focus in on its semi-serialized storytelling and develop its humongous leading cast. Adult animation needs more stuff that's too weird for kids and less stuff that's too boring for kids. On that note, one kid show that looks like it was made for adults is Nickelodeon's Adventures of Kid Danger. While it's no worse than what you would expect from an animated series dumped out of Schneider's Bakery, its very existence makes me fear the future of animation. Are we going to get more Nick spin-off sitcoms in this vein? Will it just become acceptable for a kid show to look like Family Guy? Is some executive going to look at this and think it was a good idea? Am I thinking too highly of a show with a whole episode about a Japanese toilet that John Lovett sits on for some reason? Nah, this is clearly what defined this decade of comedy.
I love it!
So, you gonna buy this toilet?
No, I just came in for the sushi.
Oh, typical.
It stinks.
I just talked about the new shows that recently caught my interest in my last video, so now I'll talk about the trio of TV movies that were released after years of anticipation. First came the Rocko's Modern Life special Static Cling. The crude humor and visuals haven't skipped a beat. For better or worse, it feels like an extended version of its predecessor. There's light commentary on modern technology and cultural trends, alongside a storyline about a minor character coming out as transgender. Similar themes and commentary were addressed in the original series, and here they're handled just as sincerely. My sole gripe here are the potshots taken at digital and CGI animation, which feels like out-of-touch criticisms from when the original series had just gone off the air. There's also this one scene where a crappy cartoon is being made that reached me on an emotional level.
Harder, you worms! Faster!
Invader Zim Enter the Florpus has the off-the-wall insanity you'd expect, wrapped up in a grander and sleeker package. I think its greatest achievement is how strong the bonds and rivalries of its core cast are within such a chaotic world that's still accessible to new viewers. The plot takes over 20 minutes to get off the ground, and within that time, it almost feels like I watched two separate opening montages, but afterwards, it becomes a high-octane joyride that continues to top itself. Steven Universe the movie reminded me that this series can be something special when it pulls out all the stops. It's never looked and sounded this good, and even does a decent job of introducing new audiences to 6 years of lore. It's not bursting with originality, but it is elevated by the new villain, Spinel the Jollibee's mascot. It looks like the creators had a lot of fun just making her exist.
So, what do you think?
If I could just stop.
And that about wraps up this video. It was a lot of work, but I'm so glad that I was able to give a mention to every single notable show from this decade. That definitely included Friendship is Magic, Fishhooks, Regular Show, Bob's Burgers, Gumball, Tron Uprising, Sanjay and Craig, Teen Titans Go, Breadwinners, Clarence, BoJack Horseman, Sonic Boom, Star vs. Voltron, Mighty Magiswords, Milo Murphy's Law, Troll Hunters, Tangled the Series, Marvel Spider-Man, Castlevania, Craig of the Creek, Big City Greens, Rise of the TMNT, Disenchantment, Total Dramarama, Hilda, She-Ra, and every popular show that came out in 2019. See, I did mention everything after all.